and welcome to the Fall Poncho Crochet Along, hosted by B.Hooked Crochet and sponsored by Shape Wool. This crochet along consists of 4 different options for you to choose from, 2 neck options and 2 finishing options, and there will be 5 video tutorials explaining the process from beginning to end. To participate in this crochet along, you will need to visit www.bhookedcrochet.com/poncho. That's going to give you the list of the supplies as well as the written instructions. In video number 4, I will demonstrate how to crochet the Pico trim option, or option number 1. Let's go ahead and get started. If you've made it this far, we are in the final stretch. We just have one final thing to finish off our ponchos, and that's to create a border. If you're on this video, you've chosen to go with option number 1, or the Pico border. So what we're going to need for this is just your yarn and your hook. And I've got it situated so this is where I have been binding off for the colors, or starting each round. So we want to bind on there. So we just want to create a slip knot. Pull that through and chain 1. Now for each of the corners, we just want to make 2 single crochets, and so that chain 1 is going to count as a stitch, so there we have 2 single crochets, and then chain 2 and 2 more single crochets. Now moving forward, we're going to be working in the back loops only so that we can maintain this same pattern that we worked on the last 4 rounds. So after we have our 2 single crochets for this side in the corner there, we want to make 2 more single crochets, so 1 in each of the next 2 stitches, working in that back loop only. And now we're ready to make our first picot. So to make the picot stitch, what we want to do is slip stitch in that next stitch there, the back loop, and chain 3. Then we're going to slip stitch again into the first chain. And there we've created our first picot. 1 double crochet, working in that back loop only. And we'll make a picot into the 5th stitch. So I'll demonstrate that one more time. Slip stitch in the back loop, then chain 3, now slip stitch into the first chain, and then make 1 single crochet into each of the next 4. So you're probably getting an idea of the pattern now. We want to make a picot every 5th stitch. So we're going to picot, make 4 single crochets and another picot, and we're going to do that until we've reached the other corner. So go ahead and finish up this first side, and then I'll come back and demonstrate how we're going to work each of the corners. So when you've reached your first corner, you should end up with a picot stitch almost right to the end. You want to have 2 stitches extra because we need to put a single crochet into the last 2 stitches of this round. And so if you have done everything correctly, if you've counted, make sure you have 4 stitches in between, and the final round of the poncho was the correct number of stitches, then you should end up perfect here. So what you want to do when we have reached the corner is just make 2 single crochets, chain 2, and then 2 more single crochets, all in that chain 2 gap space. So you're pretty used to this. We're just increasing as we normally would. We're making the corners just as we have been doing. And when we start on the other side, we're going to start it exactly the same. We want to make 1 single crochet into the first 2 stitches, and so this first post here is sometimes hard to see, but you want to make sure you get that, or otherwise your stitch count is going to be off a little bit. So that's 1 and 2, and then we'll proceed by adding the picot. And let me just explain that a little bit. I mentioned earlier that we want to make sure we have 4 single crochets in between each picot. So we're making a picot stitch in every 5th stitch. And we're doing that because the final round here of the poncho, we had a total of 105 stitches on each side. And so what we're doing is we are dividing that 105 by 5, because that's our pattern repeat. We start with 4 single crochets, and the 5th is a picot. So that's our multiple. And if you have 105 stitches, you should work out perfectly fine and have each of your picots in the same place. So that's kind of the goal here. We just want to make sure that they're placed evenly. If you've made a mistake somewhere along the way and you're off by 1 stitch or 2 stitch, honestly, you're really not going to be able to tell. So it's up to you if you need to fix a mistake if you find it, or if you just want to keep on going. It's completely up to you. So what we have is our first single crochet, second, third, fourth, and so the 5th is going to be a picot. So I just wanted to explain that in a little more detail, and that may help you in the future too. If you're ever trying to divide something up evenly, you'll kind of get an idea of how to do that. So everything from here on out is exactly the same. Okay, so we make a picot and then 4 single crochets. We're going to work all of the corners the same. And so what I would like for you to do at this point is finish up the trim on your poncho. And then we'll meet back up real quick just to talk about how to bind off, and our ponchos are going to be completely finished. So go ahead and get started on that. Finish up your trim and we'll meet back up. Okay, so what I have done off camera is I have finished up my trim, and I've got just a couple more stitches left, but I wanted to come back so I can show you exactly where you need to bind off. So I've just finished up that picot stitch there, so I have 2 more single crochets to make. And so this stitch is pretty easy to find because it's a real stitch, but this one here is a little confusing because it's part of that chain 5 from the round before. So what I like to do is just single crochet into the slip stitch where we binded this round, or where we joined this round together. So you'll see that slip stitch right here, and I'm still going to work just in the back loop. Okay, and that finishes that out. And all that's left to do is join with the slip stitch to our chain 1. Now you can see our chain 1 right here. You can see the slip knot there where I bind it on. And so I'm just going to insert my hook into the chain and slip stitch. Now at this point you can bind off, and if you haven't done so already, just weave in your ends and your poncho is complete. Thank you so much for taking the time to participate in this crochet along. On behalf of B.HookedCrochet.com and Shape Just Wool, I'm your host Brittany. Stay tuned for more free patterns and video tutorials at B.HookedCrochet.com.